So, and they're all.
So legal also, like that's policy 71,
Yeah,
right?
legal and yeah, legal or
It's
regulatory.
about use of marijuana in student adult. I think at this point, unless this student has medical license, otherwise it's definitely illegal.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Yeah, on campus,
Yeah, yeah.
use marijuana, right? So that's until July next year.
I was gonna say for now.
Yeah, but for now it's illegal.
I would also want to know a little bit more. So I just find the comment that she makes here about she even felt high the next day. What about it? Why did you feel that? Like, is there something else going on?
Yes, it
Right?
would be
When someone smoke marijuana indoors, the roommate becomes secondary smoker,
Yeah.
right?
But to me, this is something that's happening the next day. This is at least a 12-hour interval later, right? That's what I'm trying to get at. Is if she was talking about feeling high at the same time, that makes sense to me.
right.
But I'm a little bit, I don't understand why she's talking about the next day or after this happened.
It could be an allergy,
Is it, yeah,
some kind of thing that
is it a sleep
delayed effect.
deprivation?
So, Lisa, you think that it's impossible to feel it 12 hours later?
No, not that it's, well, it depends, it's not impossible.
Okay.
So what do we
If
what
there was
don't we
like,
know?
the room was hot boxed
Need to figure out.
and everything was in there,
Ultimately coming up
then
with
yes, but
objectives for what you're going to study.
she's only felt that
When you come
once,
back to
which could be that
address,
there was just one really
the
big party
issues.
night.
So the whole point of this is for you to come up with.
The fact that she says
What
next
are you
day
gonna
when
go
there's a
and study
midterm, that
to
suggests that
address?
she's trying to put the blame for the exam.
Yeah, so what are ultimately
But I don't
the learning objectives that you're going to go away with?
So we're operating here with partial information.
And we don't know anything, we haven't talked to the roommates.
And
So
we
what-
can verify the story, well, the associate dean would be able to check her academic record, the instructor would not.
So here, information, her roommate had a car. Is that a license?
That would be the license, but it has to be verified.
The
Yeah,
university needed to.
right.
The university would need to, she would have to present it to whatever agency advocates for students with medical needs.
Accessibility.
Like, our accessibility would be our equivalent, yeah. Yeah, because it's an accommodation.
And if accessibility is granted, then my understanding is when accessibility provides us accommodations,
Yep.
then that's what we have to follow.
Yep, so that would be on housing to make it work. Because it's a university.
Problem solved.
The problem solved is that it's not our problem.
Well, we identify,
That really works.
you know, we identify the problem is not her learning style. If we say, you know, she has,
It could be, they could.
yeah, she has a car, so that means she can legally use marijuana. But, you know, as a university has a responsibility to make accommodation for students because this person will wanna use affect other students.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's
That's where the policies come in.
yeah. University is a housing
If she
department.
got 85, over 85 for midterm, would she write the same email or letter
I don't know.
about concerning about
Is she, I don't know
or
what is.
concerning her health something? I don't think so.
Yeah, we don't.
You don't know. You don't know because you don't know if she's been living
Yeah,
with
you
this
don't
person
know.
for 2 years. If she lived with this person last year and she got 80s, maybe they weren't smoking marijuana last year. Maybe.
This is a blank
Yeah.
for us.
So do we know how you get a license to smoke marijuana?
You need a physician's signature. It's a prescription.
but I don't
A
think I
pharmacist?
well,
To be honest, I don't know. They don't give, they're not giving me that area of expertise, keeping it for themselves.
so
But the university has, say, the responsibility or right to check if, if a student indeed has license, right? That's the university's responsibility. That's why she came to talk to Dean, right? But this is she can resolve herself, right? So I think
right?
I mean, this medical license, that's how we can eliminate some secondary problems, right? Secondary problems, we can identify the primary problem. That's where we need to find solutions, right? I think that's pretty much a TBL about. Yeah, I think we are doing step 4. Analyze problem using existing knowledge, existing information, and then we identify the main problem, right?
The request for meeting is to discuss about the following things.
So we said we have these 3 problems.
Yeah,
And what we
we got 3 to look at.
Mark's legal and academic, non-academic repercussions, as well
Her own abilities to
Yeah.
her own abilities to manage the site. So at least 3 things to look at. There may be more as the discussion opens up.
Probably in future she could have access circumstances like by stating the requirements of the geometry or something.
So list those again, I just wanna, I've written down that you guys wanna reorder on performance.
If it makes more
So
sense to
for
say like,
academic
associate dean undergrad, then let's just assume it's an associate dean and administrator. Yeah.
So 2 and 3 are,
University policies.
Policies with respect to
Marijuana, medical marijuana, yeah.
Okay.
and then the housing. So it's this, what are the, how did she get a, like, I guess, what I wonder is if a student had an accommodation like that, and they did have a car, and they were allowed, why would they be paired with a student? Like, why would they not be given a single?
Maybe because the student actually didn't go through, the student who has a license for marijuana didn't go through the appropriate channels to get the accommodation.
They show their card.
Yeah, didn't know what was needed. Yeah. So,
To
Getting to the objectives
maybe another 10 minutes to get to learning objectives.
and then another 5 minutes maybe for that.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
I just wanted to check in just to see.
so the things that we would need to learn are situation involving roommates.
We can just keep going.
Yeah, learn the policies and legal rights for both students. And we need to learn what other things might be affecting Jasmine's performance besides this, because where there's one problem, I used to be a software designer, where there's one bug, there's many bugs. So never stop. Let's keep looking to see what other things are going on here, because she's put herself in a vulnerable spot. She's self-disclosing. She may be ready to go take a look and see what else can be changed at the same time. got a problem here, I'm ready to work on something.
So, I was just rereading it and I just had another thought.
Yeah.
So, is this also potentially a program? There are programs where first year students, it's a lot of regurgitation of
Yep.
material, and they do all get these A's. Is it possible that these courses that she's taking, that all of the students who were getting A's, that
Right.
the average score has shifted, and that everybody is getting 62s and
Where is she
57s?
standing with respect to the rest of the class in this course?
And so is this normal because it's no longer a straight regurgitation?
Yeah,
Or
yeah,
is she
yeah.
not good, like she's not good at the application or whatever's being asked on the midterm?
Yep.
And that's what everybody is doing.
And that adaptation or adjustment from first year to second is gonna be a big,
Right.
yeah.
In engineering, that's not the case for all the courses, and the grade are curved.
They're correct.
So I think the department of the Dean's office just give guideline. For example, the extra class should be about 75%. Right? That's why her statement is justified. So you look at here, you know, she may not be an engineer student, but you know, it's an engineer student always this is below everybody else. So it's a word, right? For any student.
When they're below class average?
Yeah, it's a word, yeah.
Everyone has the same problem.
But we don't,
Except normally what would happen
we don't know that this
You're in
course
separate rooms.
has that same application, right?
This
So
discussion.
it could be a course, we have courses where the class average is a 91, right? And so that's a 91 and our average is a 71 for the same students in the course. She might not be as a
Yeah. And
Okay.
that's a matter of managing expectations.
So what do you guys think, what do you think the solution would be? And then, are there any problems with that? What else would you, what would be the solution in your mind, okay? And what else would you need to know to get there?
That's a little vague.
To find a solution, you first need to identify the problem.
Yeah, and you have, but like,
Yeah. Okay, we have 3 problems. We don't know which one is primary.
Oh, they're all tied. They all have to
All
be
the
addressed.
time. Okay.
Okay,
So can we say,
So we need to know how she's doing in
Yeah.
her other classes.
yeah,
So another issue that they're requesting a meeting to discuss her performance. So we don't know what are they gonna ask during the meeting.
Right, so we just gotta stick to what's in the paragraph here, let's not,
Yeah, I think I'm interpreting this, I might be interpreting this differently. I've interpreted that she came to meet with you, and this is what came out of the meeting, not that we're planning for a new meeting.
Yeah?
Okay? Am I,
Yeah,
that's the way I interpret it.
so she approached the associate dean.
so
Oh,
we've
yeah,
already,
yeah.
so we've already met with her?
Requested,
I
yeah.
think
They
you're,
have.
you know, the question of possible.
I think like we said, we need to understand if there's more going on in her life than just, like, we're just now like the academic advisor side of things, right? We know there's more than just this roommate issue, because like you said, there's usually more than one issue that a student is having if they're struggling, so.
you know,
I was gonna say, so an easy solution to that is letting her know that
So-
counseling services is
If you
available,
want to get to that
that
point, then
it's open for all students, that it's free
decide
for them,
on
because that tends to
what
be a
the
big
learning
one.
objectives are.
And that it's anonymous, so I can give you information about going to counseling services, but I'm never gonna know where.
Yeah, what you're gonna say.
But I can make an appointment with you and help you make that first appointment, that's useful.
So Lisa, can you frame that as like a learning objective?
Frame that as a learning objective.
I think it,
I'm just practicing with you guys how you would take these and now frame them as a learning objective.
We would want, a learning objective would be for us to be aware of all of the resources that are available to
That's
students. Well, it's student success off, it's counseling services, it's health services.
Yeah, it's almost like a short list of resources to get to.
You don't need to know specific programs, you just need to know,
I wanna-
here's where you go.
I would want to know what they are and how I get students to go to them.
Yes.
Because I don't, just knowing that they exist,
that's
that's what I want to do.
I think that's the essence of PBL. You're always trying to find best solutions. There are many solutions out there. You're always looking for the best solution. You guide the students to find best solution. So we have three problems, right? And we need to identify which problems we should or Dean should solve first. For example, illegality issue. That's something Dean needs to check first. Solve that problem.
So how would you frame that as a learning objective, do you think?
So that, to me, the objective is solve problem for this.
Is what?
It's solve the problem.
To solve the problem.
Yeah, so yes means problem.
So if
So we already identified three problems, and the objective is solve all those problems.
Right, but you want to break those problems down in learning objectives, right?
if you were to write it as an assignment,
Yeah.
what would you tell the students to do as an assignment? That's what I think you're trying to get us to do as a learning.
Yeah, so like that, the one that you framed right there was a good learning objective. It's not, fortunately not one I have on here, but you framed it as a learning objective, something that you need to research to solve the bigger problem. So what else did you've broken down some other problems.
Investigate
You don't have to send her to a doctor to.
policies and laws surrounding
Right.
smoking in dorms,
What is the
medicinal marijuana
Right.
use, yeah.
Find the relevant paragraphs of these policies,
right.
what they say. First of all, you need to find and then bring it as an objective.
Right, and you know what? I think you could probably even break that into two different ones. Policies as one and laws as a separate one, because that is a huge learning objective all it together, right?
University policy,
Yeah,
right?
and
Right.
they're changing,
Yeah.
right?
So what would you say about the policies? What do you need to know?
We need to identify the University of
University,
Waterloo's,
yeah.
or identify and understand
Yes.
University of Waterloo's policies surrounding medical marijuana use and accommodation.
Right.
And even housing.
And the
University
effect
policy on housing.
That should,
Because-
I would guess that, I would assume, and we don't always know, but that would be within the university's policies, right? Universities should have a housing policy on smoking,
Right,
right?
right.
So they should have a policy
Yeah.
Yes.
on this.
Yeah. So what's the
See?
housing office say about this?
But this is not objective.
What's that?
Is this objective?
So we need to tell as an
The
statements
process
of objectives.
to
To learn,
accomplish objective.
yeah, we need to write like that. To learn
Yes.
the policy.
We need to
okay,
use all
yeah.
of those
Yeah.
lovely.
And then second objective is to learn, to find out the relevant passage or paragraphs about using marijuana inside the dormitory. This is another objective. Third objective, to check the university policy about accommodation and relevant paragraphs. These are the objectives, I think.
Okay.
We need to write them as a correct.
Well, I don't know if it's not allowed. Not recommended, but that's
We're
different
not
than
in
not
our
allowed.
academic situations. Understand the context in which these grades are coming.
But that's, you know.
Okay, like unfortunately, you were not going to find that information through research, right? But those are questions you want to ask her. So it's not technically not a learning objective because you can't go out and research it, but
Right.
definitely something you consider when you're solving this problem, right? When you're
Okay.
discussing it when you come back to it, right?
So maybe we can write another objective to indicate the impact marijuana's effect on the health.
Oh, yes.
But there might not
Good.
be
Yeah,
So
Secondhand.
second.
yeah, see if that story is plausible.
If someone is using marijuana here in that room, is there an effect the other room?
So that
So
question,
that's another.
which is, that's an important question.
Well, they'll have,
If she was gonna try
they'll
to
have
kill her
guidance.
boys, and we
It
don't
would
know
be
what she,
how to address
I'm not sure that I really know what she wants out of this.
coming with an answer.
Even
wants to
even
talk.
she wants to change her room, or we would like to, solve this problem in our policy. We need to know that is there an effect, and if there is an effect, health
But
problem
the grading
beside
is more
there, we need to change, and
everybody
we need to know
with
that
each other
policy about the giving a room with another one who is not using marijuana to help the person, and then
like that's part of
who
it.
needs marijuana for a medical purpose, who use marijuana for medical purposes. So they're in the same room.
Interaction of the
If he uses or she uses marijuana, is there an effect on the other
are the people that are speaking in law.
So we need to know this as a kind of objective.
So understand
Understanding the side effect of the marijuana for you.
understand how secondhand marijuana smoke affects.
Right now, I don't know. University has a policy. I think it's smoking in dorm is not acceptable, not to mention marijuana. So,
I agree that's true that we say that. I think the question is when she's coming and potentially you're going to, what is it? Is it policy 72 that follows 71, the academic appeals
Yeah,
process?
72
And
is
then
the-
if she's going to go through a academic appeal process, we have to understand the scope.
Yeah. 70 is
Yeah, right, but we have to understand that the scope of the impact of secondhand marijuana smoke in order to make an educated decision on whether or not we provide her accommodations or allow her to retake the exam. That's why we need to kind of understand, as you said. Yeah.
And we don't know what she's asking, other than she's got problems with her grade. We don't know what she wants out of this. So that's another
Just in
thing
case.
to learn is what does a student, what kind of help is a student looking for?
Sure, yeah.
well, to me it's clear she has below average performance, and she attributes this to marijuana use of her roommate.
Do you think it could contribute to her academic
This
performance?
is the
Well, that's what she said, but we don't know. But if university has legal responsibility for this, if someone say carry out certain activity illegally, that's make a suit university.
as an administrative person, for example, if I am a director of a kind of, say, I was a director of foreign language school. If I got this kind of writing, and so I want, first of all, I want to be safe side of them, legally safe side of them.
Yeah, exactly. That's
So
what I'm
that's
trying
why
to say.
I try to be prepared
Yeah.
for everything.
Yeah, and
So
I think that's kind of where we're
yeah,
going with
yeah,
this, right?
yeah.
You want us to
Administrat-
understand
yeah.
all angles so that when you do know what her needs
Legally,
are,
I
you
have
can
to be
address
ready.
it properly.
Yeah. So first they need to look at the license, right? To make sure
Yeah.
if this student indeed has, can legally use marijuana. If that's the case, then the solution raised on university, right? You can't just mix the students who,
So
to
So what do you want to know about the license? Is there anything you want to know about the
Valid
license?
Ivan Bulgaret.
We can check anybody for medical license, right? But in university has right? Jasmine doesn't have right to ask her roommate to show you license, right? But she claims
But who can? Who can ask her?
The university house.
The university. Okay.
Yes,
Can the landlord ask for it?
I don't think
Everybody
so.
agrees
So we need to find out
on
who's
what they
allowed
are, so.
to ask for that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we need to not understand, but
Ascertain.
Yeah.
we need to determine who's legally allowed to request.
Right.
To request proof of
Right.
licensing.
Yeah. Yeah, who has authority
Yeah.
to get us the information we need, the relevant information, in a way that we're allowed to have. That preserves the privacy rights.
And secondly, we need to know the procedure of the getting this room together. So did he show his
So,
car
just so you're clear,
before
a learning
having
objective
this room?
you define.
I mean,
it's not
Jasmine's friend who
I'm taking
needs
this piece, she's
marijuana.
taking this piece.
So
It's like,
did they,
you guys define
you
the
know,
learning objective.
step by step,
You would all,
they
you
follow
would go
Yeah, follow the
investigate all the
procedures.
learning objectives.
even
And then you come back,
if they follow the procedure and then they put in the same room, it's a problem.
yep, no, you don't divide it. That's the whole point.
And then we need to know that is it a problem or not.
Yeah.
But-
If we solve these two problems, then the burden is raised on Jasmine, right? If she is still underperforming, then she needs to change her learning skills,
Yeah,
right?
but,
So,
and then just another thought. What happens if, so she has these 80s. What happens if she only continues on with the 60s? Is that okay? Is that okay for her program? She might, if she's a high achiever,
Yeah.
then she struggles with that, but will she be successful in graduating if she only gets 60?
I tell my students that I finished my undergraduate on probation. So, my last term, I got the letter saying you fulfilled the degree requirements, but if you come back, you're on academic probation.
so about the program, you get, 50, around 50, you can still get promoted on condition of better performance next year because students may have 90s, 80s for some other courses because the promotion rule is, sometimes it's just 59.5%.
But at 57, she would have failed the course. Because we have a 60 average.
Yeah. Yeah.
So say you guys research this and she can't have marijuana, even if it's medical marijuana, on campus, on housing, anything. What would be the repercussions of that?
Yep, so what would you ask?
Well, she may be able to have
And is it just
medical marijuana legally in Dole if she
Are there other places you would?
has that prescription, right?
You're saying she can't?
Yeah. So, but then
I'm not saying she can, but would you want to know if there's any repercussions of restricting marijuana to this person who has a medical license for it? Yeah.
if she has license,
You can't say you
then
can't do
university
it.
cannot.
You have to provide a reasonable means for them to use it,
Yeah.
So
right?
In a way that doesn't
Impact everyone
impact other
else.
students.
Yeah.
So whether it's a private room or
Yeah.
a room like the old smoking rooms you'd have outside, going blast
Another-
in. Maybe you're a new associate.
another question is big question. Which one is going to change the room?
3 minutes.
So if you
single
ask
rooms available.
rooms available, for example, one room is available, is she asking changing the room or is she asking him to change the room? That's another issue. So
can't just put another student in.
Yeah,
But that's also not.
that's a
We're
follow
not
up.
the associated of housing.
Yeah.
We're just curriculum, and so I don't.
What about
think that we get to make all those
she says she has a right
So, without changing room, we are not going to solve her problem, I think.
is that something worth investigating?
Well, if the problem's just with her roommate, then we can provide her guidance, and I think we can suggest the avenues.
That's a great question.
You need to talk to housing, right? And this is really an issue that we brought up with them.
Or even
If it's your academic performance, we can talk to student success office and get help with exam performance.
but that's a good question.
And counseling services, because maybe there's some other things going on.
And accessibility, because this is a student who clearly need, or apparently needs some kind of accommodation, but it's negatively affecting another one. Accessibility needs to know about that.
Okay, I'm gonna try to expedite things now, okay? Before you did any research into anything, is there anything you'd want to know?
Is she telling the truth?
Did she tell me? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah?
And then what is she asking?
What does she want from you?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
So if you want to divide it up, we'll
Well,
get into this.
okay, so I'd like to know what Chris has written down as your learning objectives so far. But one of them is list any precedents for this situation. So has it happened before?
Yeah, and there's also,
University.
because the precedence here isn't just medical marijuana, there's, so if I had a service dog, right? If I had a service dog and you were allergic to dogs, which one of us has the right to be here?
You both,
Right, so how do
but
we,
it's gotta be different spaces.
You need to ask the permission first.
And I think what's important about it is how was it dealt with before,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Been addressed?
And so,
I have some students who have service dog, and they're bringing service dogs to the classroom, and they need to get asked permission.
they need to ask for permission to bring their dog in,
Yes.
even though their dog has a license?
Yeah. Yeah, not one occasion, few occasions. Our students bringing the dogs to lab, to classroom. They need to get permission. And as you say, some other students
But
may
if
be
I was in a
allergic.
wheelchair, I don't need your permission to come in.
Right, yeah, I think so, yeah, because wheelchair, it doesn't affect other people, but dogs, a lot of people are allergic to.
okay, I'm just gonna bring you guys back because we only have a couple minutes left. So you talked about university policies, and that's great. The way Jeff has worded this learning objective was describe the university policies regarding the use of marijuana on campus property, and whether there's a distinction between medical use and recreational use in terms of their policies. So that's great. You guys talked about that. Number 3 was explain the process of investigating whether an individual has an appropriate medical exemption for marijuana. Can a landlord, university staff, campus police ask for documentation? What is the legal proof for medical exemption? This was one that I had a hard time getting out from you guys, and I don't know how else I could have done it, was outline the potential human rights aspects of restricting the use of medical marijuana.
Oh, yeah. I said there were rights issues, but we didn't get that deep.
Right, exactly. So that was its own sort of learning
But I
objective.
was thinking accessibility and the right to accommodation, so in the ballpark, but not there.
Yeah. And that you talked about this. I don't know if we ever phrased it as a learning objective, but describe applicable legislative and regulatory frameworks regarding medical marijuana. You talked about like the legal aspects, right? So that would have been it. And then the last one was explain the potential harms of secondhand marijuana exposure, like you guys said, and determine whether it is possible that exposure could impact test taking performance 12 hours later.
I think that there is another one. That's a
So here, Chris.
that's a
So these were. Oh, okay. Okay, good. We had just started discussing them while you were in the washroom.
Yeah.
No, I would use existing information to come up with best possible sequences.
Yeah, so yes, I've been there too.
Right?
Okay, everybody, so maybe we'll,
Just a
if
solution, right?
it's okay, we'll kind of come back.
Action. Right?
So, couple things. Just want to do this thing isn't working, so I'm just gonna come up here. I'd just love to hear what you thought about that. Oh, you need a mic. Sorry, that's right. I need a mic.
Oh, I have
You
it.
have the mic? Oh, you do. Thank you. Okay, so I always get really excited when a new group does like PBL, and as I say, I'll explain what happens next. You know the full PBL cycle, but this is a large part of PBL. I'd love to hear from some of the students what you thought about that. Any general thoughts about the learning objective procedure? Anything surprise you? Like, was that a bit different than you thought, or was that pretty much straightforward? That's exactly what you would have thought? Pretty straightforward?
It isn't straightforward.
Oh, it's not straightforward. Okay, so why not?
Because you're looking at not the answers, but how to find the answers.
So, sorry, you're looking at
You're not looking at what the answer is. You're
Got
looking at how to find the answer.
how
the
to find
process.
the answer. That's good. So now, do you think that encapsulates the PBL process? Do you think that that's a good thing, or do you think that's a bad thing? Like,
It requires more reflection, and that's useful.
good. So it requires a bit more reflection. And thank you for the honesty here. And that is one of the big things. So it's instead of and Oscar mentioned this morning about the concept of design fixation, right, where we have in our mind what the answer should be. Or again, all of us in our own disciplines are, I'm sure, you don't make it to this level without being excellent problem solvers. And so we can often, by pattern recognition even, sort of take a look, well, this is probably where the answer is going to lie. But this, you're right, intentionally takes you out of that going straight to the issue and say, let's really engage with this problem. And so that's, honestly, this is really why I'm in love with PBL, is because as a student, like when I was doing my doctorate training, this really resonated with me. It wasn't I finally got out of the concept that it's not the therapeutic knowledge that makes me a good pharmacist. It's how I engage with problems is what it is. And so I think it was the problem-solving skills that I got out of the PBL that, to me, that's why that U of T program was so much better than the UBC program, which was the option for me. So thank you for articulating what I would have never been able to say that as well, but I agree completely with that. Any other thoughts? Anyone else? Did you struggle at all with it, or was it pretty straightforward? Now I know, again, I'll say here, this group got the learning objectives so quickly because you've got the best tutor in the world. This guy, there are tutors all across the world, but this guy is the best. Steve is and so if any of you, when you start your programs, are looking for a tutor, Steve would be happy to come and be a tutor. All right, there we go, buddy. So anyway, but did you struggle at all with it? Or did it seem like a natural process, like how you might look at things, or, yeah?
So I felt like, that's okay.
I think it's more for the video, just so they can pick it up. Yeah, sorry. That's all right.
So I felt like we started off, there were a bunch of obvious things, and we started off, we identified those really quickly, but then it took time to think about other alternatives, like what are the other non-obvious things, and that really took a lot of time to somebody would identify something like, oh, this is something we haven't thought about. So I thought that part was interesting.
Excellent. And it's great, because I was saying over here that when I was talking to Catherine and Oscar, I'm like, this is actually good that they're still doing this about a half hour later, because again, you can engage very superficially, but if you really do an intentional and very thoughtful approach to this, it should take about that long. Now, what I will say, just for your own sense in terms of planning, I find that the learning objective development, and Justine's going to speak about this later too, but the learning process, learning objective setting process takes the longest the very first time you ever do this. So it's not like every single time you do a case, it's going to take 45 minutes. In fact, I think you'd agree with me. In my experience, first one might take about that, half an hour, 45 minutes. And then after that, the next one's about half an hour. And then you get quite good at it, about your again, defining terms and so forth. And it actually, I think most groups can usually do it in around 20 minutes. Okay, so it does get easier. So instead of thinking, wow, that was a long period of time, it does get better. That's your first time. So I think that was actually about what I would expect. That's great. Any other comments from any of the students? What you thought about that? What do you think? Could you see your students doing this in your classes and stuff like that? Or do you anticipate any?
Yeah, I think the process is great. Identify problem and brainstorm the information, find a solution. That's great for students. But the objective, if the objective are not clear, it's very challenging for students.
Yeah.
Right. So.
Yeah.
That's just.
So now, do you have a way that it could be improved then, or any thoughts about that, or?
Well, in engineering, in chemical engineering, we have this problem-based laboratory. So it's very similar to PBL. So we found that if we give students a very ambiguous objective, it's very challenging for students.
Yeah.
Students just don't know where to start. But
Yeah.
if we identify objective from very beginning, and it's much easier for students. So the challenge is we don't have as good tutor as just yeah. So that's a challenge.
That's good. And I will say, actually, Justine is actually the best too. You're awesome, man, but she is actually the best. But so and so you're right. So I think that's the key of a really good tutor is to help with that, because you're right. This is very nebulous, right? There isn't anything. It's like here's the case. Like, what do you think? That type of thing. And it's under an expert tutor's tutelage that will help you become very defined with those objectives. And the reason why, like, is you're right on the level, like. Well, I'll be honest, I've never been tempted to give the learning objectives because I think that goes counterintuitive to everything about PBL, but the students always ask me, and it would be so much easier for me to go, fine, here are the objectives. And the reason why not is because I'll emphasize once again, and we spoke about this morning, the where we place this course in pharmacy is just before they go out and are independent practitioners. If they're still reliant on me at that point for me to define what the important objectives are for a particular clinical scenario, I haven't done my job. I really think it's important, because when they're out there and they have that patient with multiple sclerosis that we didn't have time to cover in our curriculum, I want Justine, a recent grad, to be able to go, I know how to engage with this problem. And now I can go through the process, come up with my learning objectives, and know where to go get that. So I agree, it's a struggle though, because the students will push back a tiny bit, but that's kind of how I push right back and say, it's because I want you to be able to do this when you're on your own then. Yes?
And in terms of curriculum, what is your course's learning objective?
So we actually have learning objectives, and so we match our learning outcomes to the, it's the AFPC, so the Accredited Pharmacy Faculties of Canada suggests what the learning outcomes are for our program. So our graduates have to achieve a series of learning outcomes, and we map all of our course objectives to that. And so virtually all of mine for my courses, for this one in particular, IPFC9, is I map them to skill-based competencies. So they are scholars. So one of the outcomes for a pharmacist, they must be scholars, and then they have subdivided elements. One of them is being able to access information, be able to critically appraise this, and so forth. So I map it to our AFPC outcomes. So it's kind of easy for us to do that, because we have some accreditation standards that we have to live up to. So, any other comments from any of the students in the process? Yes.
A lot of this looks a lot like the decision-making meta model I give to ethics students.
Okay.
So, yeah, it's a very similar process to what I want my students to go through when I give them an ethical case to analyze and make some recommendations on.
Fantastic. So great. So it's already got some validity from kind of things that you've used, and you can see some application there then.
Yeah.
Good. What would be different? What would be the most glaring difference between what you would do and what this would be?
Most glaring difference would be that I give them a lot of background information on ethical theories first.
Okay.
And then some instruction in the model, of course, but I'm thinking I may just be able to jettison some of that and say, here, you know how to read, go find it.
Interesting. Fantastic. That's great. Thank you for sharing that. I want to hear what the tutors would say. So Justine is going to share some comments after. I'm looking at these two fellas. Again, my fresh meat tutors who are scared to death about doing this, by the way. Oscar even skipped out. No, I'll just sit back. I'm not going to do it. Because what did you guys find challenging? And both of you have had experience in doing it for your sample ones. Did you find anything different between how this was versus what you used in your course, or like was there anything tricky? Was it okay? What do you think? Any comments?
Sure. Well, it was just being comfortable with their discomfort, like being like okay when they're saying nothing, and just like, you know, okay, like they're really not sure what to do, and like they went like they listed off like a whole ream of stuff that was like very detailed, and then it was like, okay, then to try to pull back a little bit. But then to like just thinking about the process when it was like, okay, so what are like the learning objectives for your group, and reminding them like you as a group need to have learning objectives that you're going to go research, as opposed like they were each jotting down things individually, but like to bring them like say, okay, so what as a group do you agree on? And they're like, oh, well, I thought we all agreed on that. Well, did you?
Interesting.
And then a couple of the objectives were really like took a while to get to, and took like a bit of finally some prodding, like the like just precedence of whether it happened. I was surprised that didn't come up at all in all of the discussion. And then the rights, like just the more basic rights issue of like like is it the student said it's my right, so do they have a right, and what are the rights, and at what level of rights, is it a human right, is it like what, and that took some a bit of prodding, and they wanted to start debriefing, and I'm like, no, let's just wait on that. And it was also interesting that like they seemed to want to divide it up, and okay, well we'll no, but I mean, but it was the default, like, okay, so my learning objective is this, my learning objective is this, like, so I'll investigate this thing. And I was like, no. You guys need to agree as a group what the objectives are, and then, like, you go research them and come back. And, there was a comment like, well, when the tutor leaves, like, there's nothing stopping us from working as a group or dividing it up, which is true. But in the end, like, you're responsible for like examination-wise on everything. And if you don't know everything, or if you come back the next week and you're talking about one learning objective each, and nobody else is saying anything else, that is going to be pretty obvious that you haven't actually done anything on the other ones.
Yeah, great points.
May I respond to this, because it's our group?
Sounds like you had a tough tutor there, right?
I assume, and I think the group members in a regular class may still give each other hints or feedback or summary of their objectives. So if I'm studying part A and you're studying part B, we'll get together for 15 minutes and brief each other and everything, so that we can answer all the questions. It's not to cheat, it's to teach each other and use the time wisely. So I'll be learning the final outcome that Cheryl did. So why do I need to go through the 3 hours of investigation before finding the thing? So this is not questioning the model. This is just thinking loudly about efficiency, time efficiency.
Yeah, and so it's a good point. And so what we do is, and I think Scott, again, for those who weren't here this morning, there are actually grading rubrics that we use for this. So the tutor, in addition to helping with the learning objective process, they'll actually be grading the students when they come back and do the discussion. And you got it. That's how we ensure that the students are independently researching the objectives, because if there are people who are clearly proficient in part of it but not the other part, their grade will suffer. And that's the feedback that they'll get then, is that, you know what, more balance in your participation is required. I need you to contribute to the discussion, and not just in a superficial manner that way. It's interesting, as a tutor, you can also tell when some groups do that model of where, like I've actually been a tutor where like they do, essentially the tutorial is just mock because they've already had their tutor meeting to kind of say, okay, how about you take this one and I'm going to set you up. I'm going to ask you this question and then you can answer it. And it's like scripted. So I'll be sitting there and it's like, oh, John, didn't you have some interesting stuff about hypertension in the elderly? Oh, well, thank you, Bill, for bringing that up. I'd like to tell you about that now. And it's been that obvious. And so we discourage that because, once again, we want this to be independent learning, accessing, retrieving. If it is split up, and students will have a tendency to do that, you're not getting enough skill development in my mind, right? You're only searching your question instead of searching 6 different learning objectives. So, but I recognize some groups may do that, but it's more true to the process if the students are independently doing each of them, and that's what we try to aim for. Jason? Yeah, for sure.
So the concept of being, this was uncomfortably beneficial, I think, as a student. So I was uncomfortable at first and went, wow, that was really neat, but I knew, okay, this is better. And I, unlike the group over there, we did it very much bounce back and forth, and I learned a lot from each other, so I found it very good. What happened at one point when we were kind of waffling on the true getting these objectives was this global objective helped refocus myself, and I think I brought it around. It was like, no, what are we looking for here? So that, I didn't think you did that. And so I think this is a helpful piece, is that global objective, to refocus on what we're doing. We didn't get the wording exactly right, but I just wanted to point that was a really good.
I'm really glad you brought that up. And so what I'm sharing with you is, and once we're finished the discussion, we will actually give you a copy of the tutor guide so that you have access to what your tutors had and what, again, Justine in particular is very brilliant. Steve is just a very close second behind there. I hope you understand, Scott. I still think they're good, but they're brilliant alone, very just on that sense. But I'll show you how the tutor guides are structured so you understand what tutors have versus students. But I'm glad you brought that up, Jason. I forgot to mention that global objective, I think, is very important for that very point, right? That's the beacon. So the tutors can use that to reflect back. Remember, what are we talking about here? Like a good example from my cardiology world would be, again, by the end of this case, students are going to be able to understand the proper assessment of an elderly individual with hypertension. So anytime you deviate too far from that, the tutor, if you start talking about pediatrics or something, guys, what's the global objective? Oh, right, okay, hypertension in the elderly. So that's good. I'm really glad that you brought that up. That is an important aspect of it. Any comments, Steve?
Yeah, just so if we look at the overall process that we did as a group, everyone was talking together, and I think the idea of structuring it in learning objective form, now that we've done it the first time, if we had a different problem and it was the exact same group, I feel we'd be a lot more efficient. Now that after you guys look at the answers and you say, oh, okay, that's kind of how learning objectives are structured. Oh, that's when we were kind of trying to get a little more in depth. That's kind of where we were going. I think each additional time we would meet as the same group, I think it would get better and better and better. And so it's just that first time I'm trying to figure out, okay, what would be important? Do we, if we're going to talk about regulation, okay, we did regulation at university and as well as overall government regulation. Should they be the same objective? Well, is it separate objective? What does it matter? And then after we know, okay, that's maybe 2 objectives, in the next problem, okay, something like that would be 2 objectives. So it's just learning. I think that the learning experience we had now, if we met again and we did a different problem, I think it'd be that much better.
Do you keep same groups?
Yeah, for the whole course. For that course, I keep the groups. Yeah, we don't rotate the groups. And then one thing I'll touch on there before not self-select, so I randomize. Randomize, and to say this morning I was talking about how I used to sort of pick out, okay, I know these students are good students, I'll make sure I sort of put them in, and I got some students to tell me if they were dating anybody, so I wouldn't put them in the same group, that type of thing. But essentially I've randomized for the past 5 years and I have no problems with it, because again, if there is an issue where one group is quieter than another group, I think that's good, because then that encourages the growth of the people within the group, because if they don't participate, they don't get the grades. So it's really helping, and the tutor really plays a big role in terms of making the student feel comfortable and come out of their shell, if you will. The one thing I want to touch on in terms of I agree with everything you said, is that's one of the reasons why the learning objective process gets easier with the same team, because you understand the ground rules for that team. One of the other things is, Scott highlighted it, is that no one picked up on, and I throw in these, and they'll start to learn the case developers. So in brackets, I believe, in air quotes, so brackets, quotes, I said, it's my right. I guarantee you the next time you guys saw a case that I wrote that there was something in quotations, you'll probably go, that's probably important. Because that's the point. I wanted that to be a red flag, that if the student is saying, hey, it's my right to smoke this, that should, in my mind anyway, logically say, wait a minute, is it her right? So so that would be quicker, because I think some of those case embedded points in there would actually come out a bit quicker. So along with the process, but then you also pick up a couple clues that would be written into the cases. That's good. Yeah, Justine, yeah.
I just wanted to say something quick.
Please do.
So I think one of the things we struggled with was this whole, you are the associate dean of the curriculum. So from that perspective, what can you do about the problem? Which is not necessarily these learning objectives, because that may not be our concern, right? But in pharmacy school, I think it's a lot more clear, because you are the pharmacist,
Yeah.
this is what you're going to deal with. And I think that you'd find that in each specialty too, because you know exactly where you stand. This is such a broad subject, so I think it was a little harder that way.
Perfect. And
for this group, it was a good one because we all have exposure to this aspect. So I just wanted to let you know.
And I was going to say, and I think that's excellent that you say that. I would have thought that'd be a good learning objective then. If the group kind of struggled like that, but wait a minute, what does the associate director of the curriculum do anyway? And I don't know, it's probably different in different schools. There's a learning objective. Find out what the heck the associate director of curriculum does. So, and you're absolutely right, it was difficult writing this case. Like, I had to engage all my creative juices and know I didn't partake in order to write this case, but it made it easier, but so good. That's a good point though. But as I say, anytime there are things, that's almost where I'd go in terms of like defining all the characteristics there. If one definition is what does the associate director of curriculum do and why would that person be going there, that might be something one group I want to go down. But once again, it wasn't in the instructor objectives, and the differentiation between those, again, it's the student developing their own learning objectives is a powerful stimulus for learning. So I never want to quash any independent interest that the student has. The role of the tutor in that case would be to say, and Justine knows this very well, is like, what a great thing. Yeah, by all means, look into the role of the associate director or dean of the curriculum. However, know that that's not one of the instructor objectives. You don't need that for the exam. Like, don't spend 3 hours looking at that. By all means, if you want to take 5 minutes and have a break, awesome, but that's not one of those. So that's what the tutor would do, is say, yeah, go nuts. And then, of course, what that leads to then is, you know, so this group will be looking at that, and I guarantee you afterwards you'd all meet somewhere and you go, what are your learning objectives? And you compare and go, we're going to look at the associate director, dean of the curriculum, what do they do? And you'll be like, we didn't have that, why didn't our group? And so then it's like, they're going to know something we don't know. So then that's where the course coordinator then, I have to facilitate these disagreements and say, it's because their group was interested in it, and that's fine. I guarantee you the core concepts you're both going to get just fine. So again, that makes my life crazy, but I think that's an important thing to not stifle that independent creativity and interest.
So have you ever had an experience, say it's either between groups where you've had to step in and clarify it, or have you even had to, at a course level, send out something subsequently and say, I want to address this because I became aware of this as a result of the objective identification exercise?
That's great. So just for the sake of the camera then, so the question was, have I, as the course coordinator, ever had to step in either to mediate any differences between groups or a concern where one group's getting one thing the other group isn't, or have I ever had to class-wide send something out to alleviate concern? In the beginning I did. So I'd say the first 2 years that I ran this problem-based learning program, I would have to do that. I would send out like through Learn in the course announcements. And again, I have no lectures. I have one lecture for about an hour and a half to introduce the students to PBL and to do what you just did, we do as a full class. And so I get them in their groups with no tutor, get them in the groups to go through that process. And then as a class, we do the learning objective development, right? And so it takes about 45 minutes an hour. That's the only lecture I have in my class. So the only communication I personally as the coordinator would have then is at exam, so they hate me whenever they see me. But then the other thing would be through announcements. And usually what I send out are just clarification for the exam. But in the first 2 years, I actually did have to say, just a reminder, folks, some groups may have different objectives. I promise you, though, the tutors have been trained to make sure that every group has at the bare minimum the core ones that you'll be responsible for on an exam. If there are any differences between groups, do not worry about it, okay? And so, but what's happened then is now I just try to do a better job when I'm doing my PBL overview with the class, is to be so explicit. And I talk quickly, I realize I'm trying to make sure we stay on time. In the course, that's where I really slowed down. That's how I emphasize. That's my way to emphasize. I don't know how you do it, but I'm just like, okay, now we're going to talk slowly. There may be some different learning objectives from group to group. And so I do a better job explaining it, I think. I still, every single year, will get individual students that will email me or come to me in my office saying, it's still, that group's still getting different ones, and so I have to do it personally, but I don't have to do it at a class level anymore. So a great question, but I think maybe I do a better job up front now. Any other comments from tutors or students? Yes?
So you kind of mentioned that making these problems is hard,
Yeah.
right? I was just imagining, because my background is computer science, so I imagine we could potentially, go to people who need software and be like, oh, make up a scenario. But do you intentionally throw in these uncertainties or like these messy things to make it?
Yeah. And so this morning we spoke a little bit about, and I've got a really good reference for you for elements of a good case. So I'd be happy to share that with you. And again, all the slides will be up there, and I have the citation on there. One of the elements of a really good case is the realistic nature to it. And I would imagine whether it's computer science, engineering, pharmacy, optometry, whatever it is, real life is filled with uncertainty. So I honestly do not throw in anything. This was obviously myth. I just made this up. I have no clue if that actually has happened. Isn't it? I want to go research it. I don't know about you. Isn't it? It's interesting. I'd like to figure out what the heck the answers to those are. So if anyone does, email me what the answer is. But all of the cases that I use in pharmacy are all based on patients I saw in the clinic next door. And that's the easy part, though. So I've got a very real life case, and I don't throw extra stuff in. It's like, here's the case, right? The hard part of it, after you have those examples, though, are to actually define what are my instructor learning objectives, and then to write the tutor guide. And so the tutor guides, as we spoke about this morning, like they can be like sometimes 8 or 10 pages, and because I write them in the format of probing questions to help the tutor when the conversation slows down to kind of peak up, get the students talking again. So like to answer your question directly, no, I don't actually add elements in because I find real life is nebulous and uncertain and gray enough that just giving them the actual real life thing, that's kind of what happens. I find it's the opposite. When we're designing cases for earlier in the curriculum, and I use the example of in the first year, we do asthma, and not in PBL, but just in traditional format, I have to de-uncertaintize, I don't know if that's a word, but make it clear, like, oh, I'm going to forget that because that's too hard. They'll never get that, and I'll forget. And that's how I make it unrealistic. Whereas in this 4th year course, I try to make it as realistic as possible. So anyways, I can give you that reference if you're interested in designing the good cases. And I'll bet you, Millie, you're right, you can find some good cases in computer science. That'd be excellent. Yeah?
One final comment about our tutor. I found really how uncomfortable he can be during the times that we are all silent.
Yeah.
So sometimes it gets like we are thinking or we don't have anything to say, or if I'm Scott, then I would just say anything. Like it really felt very awkward at this point.
And I love that you said that. And so again, one of the elements that, like the students in our pharmacy program have a lot of group work. By the time they hit 4th year, they've been in groups for almost every single class, and I think a lot of them now in the group course. This is different though. It's not group work because it's individual work, but you're doing it in a team way. One of the things I learned from being a student, but also a tutor in PBL, is exactly what you mentioned, is to learn to become comfortable with silence. And I love to fill airtime as well, but it was a very powerful time when in a medical school tutorial, one of the strongest student in there, who's actually a practicing doc now, she's phenomenal. But she'd fill in all the, like anytime it was dead air, she's like, and you could almost see the look of like, okay, no one else is prepared for this. All right, so now I'll talk about the anatomy of the thymus gland. Here we go. So she'd start going to the board, and she knew her stuff like cold, right? And so finally, after about the 4th tutorial, she said, when we were doing the reflection, it's like group dynamics, and she goes, okay, I'm just going to say it. I am actually kind of tired of the fact that there are about 2 of us who are doing all of the work in the tutorial. And I feel like I have to go up there and lead the discussion, do all this and so forth. The person right beside her, who was the quietest person, said, yeah, well, okay, interesting. Thank you for sharing that. I have to say this. There is never enough time allowed for me to feel comfortable to join in. I know every single thing that you're saying, but you've never given me the opportunity to do it. So talk about uncomfortable. Like, it's almost like I want to grab a bowl of popcorn. Like, what's going to happen next, right? Oh, my goodness. But it was amazing. And that was the best group dynamics that I've ever had, because after that was out in the open, that particular individual who now is the family doctor and everything like that, she would grow, imagine her as a person and going, oh, I never thought about that. Because she did. She's like, I'm so sorry I did that. And of course, the other students said, no, I should have mentioned that sooner. But it was great because then subsequent tutorials, it'd be quiet and it'd be fine. And we'd just be quiet for a bit. And then sure enough, 1 or 2 of the other students would speak in. So, but it's so good. You will learn more about yourself either designing a course like this or being a tutor in a course like this, and the students will grow immensely because of that. Like I think group dynamic skills, I've genuinely benefited, and I know students have, from being immersed in this process. And once again, it's the reflection that led to that. So anyway, thanks for the comments. Did you have something, Scott, to say? Okay. He's silent. Yes. Yeah, that's right. I've said too much.
I have a question. When you run a course with this model, problem-based learning, do you have this activity every lecture, or just you have to fit in something?
Every single lecture. Again, so the only thing I have 2 weeks out of an 8-week course. 2 weeks I give them independent time to do an evidence-based medicine precursor. I call it EBM boot camp, just to remind, they're 4th year, so they should know EBM principles, but of course everyone forgets them. So we do an EBM boot camp. So it's not me, they do self-directed, it's online. And then I do the 1-hour lecture with them, and then every single week for the next 7 weeks, they do this. And so it's just a different case they get every week, and that's it. All of their grades are based on, again, 2 midterms that they have that are short answer questions based on those learning objectives. So one of them might be, I might give a case, and another example of, someone's smoking marijuana in a public park, right? And talk about the rights that a police officer has to ask them if they have a medical marijuana card. Something like that, and so they'd have to answer that question based on that. So again, it's sort of connected to this, but it's a bit different. It's not the student there, it's in a park, that type of thing. So they have exams like that. So 50% of their mark would be on the basis of a midterm and a final, and then 50% of their grade is based on their individual performance in the tutorial. And again, I've got rubrics that I'm happy to share to show how we do that. And so, yeah, this is the whole course. This is it. Yep. Yes? So exam is the only way of assessment. Right? No, so the exam, the McMaster Medical School, and again, as a tutor there, so I've been with them now for about 10 years almost, they don't do it. All of the students' mark is based on their performance in tutorial, period. And so I go through the rubric, and all they get is either an exemplary, satisfactory, borderline satisfactory. I never understand what that means, but borderline satisfactory and then unsatisfactory, right? But they have to throw that one in there. That's confusing to me. And that's it. And that's what I want my course to be. But our curriculum committee refuses that. They're like, no, there has to be an exam. I'm like, come on. So every year I shave 5% off the exam because you don't have to do a course change modification if it's only 5%. So every year I keep like going down. So eventually in 5 years, it's going to be all based on, anyway, hopefully I get that way. Unless I get fired by them. But so that's how I do it. So I have the exam for 50%, 50% the evaluation. So I think you can do both, whatever you feel more comfortable. If it's like, I really want to make sure they have some content, so I want an exam, great. Or if you say, I just want it to be tutorial, you certainly can do that. There are models of that. I think what's most important, though, the assessment technique you use for a course like this is way different than you would do for something delivered in a didactic format with multiple choice exam, right? Content regurgitation, or, and I know you can design better multiple choice. Having said, I've never seen a multiple choice exam that's appropriate for PBL. So you do have to consider, you probably have to have some extra resources to grade short answers and essay-based forms. So that's how we do it in pharmacy. Yes?
So how long or how many iterations does it take for you to develop a course and make a mature PBL course?
I would say, probably because of my experience, the first time I did it was fine. The only revision that I've made over the years was because of an academic integrity issue, and that was the students got a hold of one of the tutor cases. And so when we give you the tutor exam, you'll see, like I don't have the full tutor guide, but it would have the answer key almost. So the students got a hold of that, and of course you can imagine how well you perform in the tutorial if you got the answers. So I had to make a modification. The modification was no electronic devices in tutorials. You can bring any paper copy of anything you want, no electronic, because that way, if it sounds like you're just reading verbatim from an answer key, we will actually confiscate your material. And if it's found to contain that, you might be expelled from pharmacy and you're in 4th year. And so once I say that to the students, like, oh my God, that's the only modification I've had to make. And again, I think it's because of my experience with it as a student and then with McMaster, that the first time I went, I have to say it actually went pretty well. Having said that, I don't want anyone to be discouraged about that because we spoke this morning about like how Steve is incorporating aspects of this into the School of Finance with Scott's assistant, and it can be certainly a progressive nature. So, but I would say to answer your question, it was like right away just throw it in and there it goes. But there are resources for you to certainly go. Again, I'm happy to help you if you're considering things like that, and CT's got some of those things too. Just in the interest of time, because I know we want a break, I'm just really quickly going to go through, I think I've got four or five slides just to finish this so that, okay, this is the example. So if you actually were the students, what would you do now? So you've got your learning objectives. So I would give you time in the curriculum where you would independently go and research those. So you've got your 5 or 6, and so away you go. Yes?
So, sorry, about those 4 to 6 hours.
Yep.
Is that like registrar scheduled time?
Registrar schedule time. Now I've got...
We never did it during those scheduled time. We
Right,
did it on
it's,
our own time.
yeah, it's like homework. You
Yeah.
can do whatever the hell you want, right?
Yeah, we have those content hours, and that's what I was saying. So it's tricky because if you're going, oh shoot, I've only got 3 hours in a lecture hour or something, or a lab hour, or a tutorial hour or something like that, that's what you'd be doing is amalgamating those. And you'd say, because maybe you wouldn't have 3-hour tutorials. Maybe you'd say, well, we're going to do a 2-hour tutorial because there's smaller problems, and I'm going to give you those extra 2 hours to research this, and again, be on your own time. But yes, those are protected times, registrar-controlled hours in the curriculum is what we do. And as I said, what you'd be doing, we'd be looking all over. There are some resources that you need to go to. It's not just going to Google. It's not just going to a textbook. It's not just going to the university policy. Again, I give you that one in there. Of course, it's the healthcare professional in me. Is it truly a health issue? Like, is it truly going to impair performance? Well, the only way you can answer that is to look at primary literature in my mind. So that was me. That's the instructor saying, that's how I'm making sure you're going to do some critical appraisal for this one. Just,
I was a little stuck on the comment that I heard from a past student and your comment about being adhered with the, what do you call it, protected time, but you didn't use that protected time.
Well, no, it was slotted in our timetable, but I didn't do my research during that time. I did whatever I wanted during that time. I could do it whenever I wanted.
So what's the importance of keeping it protected? I want to hear that articulation.
It was just so that, you can't, I couldn't come up with an excuse as to why I wasn't prepared. Because there were 6 hours in the week scheduled where I could have done
And
that.
your adult learners go for it. Okay.
you got it. So even though it was Monday and Tuesday afternoon are in the schedule, if Justine said, I'd rather do it Sundays, and then Monday afternoon is my golf game, right? I'm sure that's what you do. Then you can do it that way, right? But the key is, because if the curriculum's too full, like if you don't have extra hours to dedicate to this, that would be the conundrum thing. Because if Justine's I've got like 6 other courses, I've got no time. So I'm saying, nope, these are hours that are dedicated to this course.
Yeah, I asked that question before lunch because what was in my mind, and I didn't explain this at the time, is I was thinking, okay, a lot of students in pharmacy probably come from a science background where they may have labs attached to courses or whatever. They spent at least a couple years, as you indicated, maybe 4 years, in an environment where upwards 30 hours a week of scheduled time, so to speak.
Yeah.
We come from an environment where they have 15 hours of scheduled time. And so I was very curious when I asked you that, was like, is there a stick or is it mostly a carrot? And you'd say, well, it is, and I used the term signaling effect, and you'd said, yeah, but I still see value in that. Because I think of where we teach, we just have that 3-hour class, and if we're dealing with undergrads, and it's just, you sort it out before the next lecture, I can still see the value of the signaling effect where we say in the schedule, here's 6 hours, no one's going to be standing over you, but this is how important we think it is, that you see it on the schedule.
Yep.
And my takeaway was always like, do we as a School of Accounting and Finance need to start to think that way? Especially considering we're dealing with not students with 5 years of university experience or more, but with maybe 2 years of university experience.
That's a great point.
Can I weigh in on that? So the signaling effect is an interesting concept. I would argue that it's also important to signal to the department faculty that this is protected time, right? Not just the students. And as a former director of curriculum development, it's very, very important to show that protected time.
And the last thing I'll say with that, excellent comments, by the way. One of the other things, you might need to get creative with your courses then too. So one of the things I've been saying a couple times, I don't know if anyone picked up on that, these aren't 12-week courses, right? This is an 8-week course that I've condensed from 12. So I've put all those hours into weeks, so I've condensed it that way. So if you've got like a weekly, I like the idea actually of putting the extra 3 in that example where you have 15, let's put in the extra 3 there. But if you're in like, oh, we can't do that, What if instead of, if you take a 12-week course and you have 3 hours per week, condense it into a 6-week course, and now you've got 6 hours a week, 3 hours for prep, 3 hours for the tutorial, right? So that's how you can get a bit creative maybe by how you squish those hours. And again, it might not work for everybody. I'm just saying that maybe if you get creative with that, that might work. So you go off and do that, okay? You've got your learning objectives. You've got a week now. Go off and do that, and then you come back to meet as a group. And I reviewed this with the group in the morning. Essentially, here's what the tutorial would look like. So you come back, and you would spend probably 2 out of the 3 hours talking about your learning objectives. Nothing is working for me now. It's not on. That's why. So, okay, 2 hours, you talk about that. And again, doing learning objectives helps you structure that tutorial. So it's like, okay, we had learning objectives 1 through 5. And then someone in the group might go, hey, you know what, learning objective 3, after having researched it, that makes more sense to start with that. Is everyone okay with that? Sure, let's talk about 3 first. So you can use those as the outline for what your tutorial will look like. And again, most well-functioning tutorial groups will actually write on a whiteboard and go, okay, let's create an agenda class here. Okay, great, let's talk about these things first. 3, then 5, then 1, 2, and 3, or whatever. Take a break, and then that's when you come back to the case. So you won't engage again with this particular individual, Jasmeet, I think, until you've discussed all the learning objectives, take a break, and then you come back and go, what are we going to do in this case? And then hopefully, because the way I've structured this, it's probably not one right answer, you know, someone might even say, well, here's what I would do if I was associate director of Clearum. Based on this policy and this health, the public health recommendation, this type of thing, I'd probably take this approach. And then Steve might, as a student, not as a tutor, would go, interesting. I interpret that differently. And this is the approach I would go. And perfect. And again, it's more the justification. So and the tutor might facilitate it. Say, can you explain that more, Steve? Why would you do that, right? That would be the role of the tutor to help get that discussion going a bit more. The next thing that would be done is you go back and you would have a new case now. So next week after we've done all this, I would actually do the exact same thing and go, here's your next case. And you wouldn't know it in advance because I don't want you working ahead. You would start doing it after you've put this baby to rest. And you do the learning objective process, right? Come up with your learning objectives. And again, it would probably only take about half an hour, maybe 15, 20 minutes. And then the final thing you do is reflect upon the process, right? So the tutor would sit there, and this, again, the first time you do it, the tutor is probably a bit more like, okay, I'll take the lead. So for example, the tutor might say, okay, guys, we had that. First of all, I want to say, this is your first time doing this. Great job, right? And to try to be as supportive as you can. That was awesome. Like, it was really good. You might even highlight a couple things that were excellent. Like, hey, it was so great how Lisa was suggesting about doing the agenda. That made things flow so good. So way to go, Lisa. One of the things I would like to see you do next time is to have a bit more balance in the discussion, okay? So I noticed that everybody seemed really prepared for 1 or 2 learning objectives, but then their participation tapered off. So I'll remind you, I've got a rubric, and I can only grade you if you do participate, right? So just a reminder to everybody, okay? So keep up some really good things like that. Here's what I'd like everyone to focus on next week. Now, I'd like to start by going around the table and have each student tell me one thing that they thought they did really well this week and one thing they're going to work on for next week. And then after they've done that, I'd like them to suggest one thing that the group can do better for next week. And so I'd hand over to Lisa now, and then Lisa go, okay, well, again, I thought I did a pretty good preparation, but I have to admit, I don't think I went deep enough, and I probably didn't critically appraise the papers well enough. I kind of just read the abstracts. So next week, my goal is I'm going to critically appraise my evidence better. I think the group was pretty good, but you know what? I'd prefer if we could take a break a little bit sooner because I need to use the bathroom. So whatever, something like that. But that's what it would be, and then it would go around the table like that, right? And again, it's the reflection that brings out a lot of the things that I think help people grow as individuals and fellow team members and so forth. So the last thing I'll say, I'll leave off with it. Oh, sorry, was there a question? Sorry, yes.
I wanted to know whether we have to come to an agreed upon solution or answer?
No, absolutely not. In fact, sorry, and the question for the camera, and there was a great one, is do they have to come to an agreed upon answer? And sorry, I didn't mean to be so excitable, but no. That's the beauty of these cases. Maybe an example of the computer science, and this just shows my ignorance and I don't know anywhere near about it. And thank goodness for computer scientists because I don't know anything about it. I don't know if there is maybe one answer in computer science, right, for a particular problem. In healthcare, there's never one. There's never one. Like, you know, maybe in a life-threatening situation where you have to get fined, but the way these cases are developed, no, there's probably 5 ways. Again, I want to encourage that difference in opinion that's well justified, that the tutor validates and goes, you know what, guys, either of those would be perfect, that helps the students get comfortable with the concept of uncertainty and gray. Because the more they see that and they go, so there really are two answers, and my tutor, she's wonderful, and he's pretty good, and he's not bad. They all agreed that those are fine. Wow, I'm starting to realize that there is more than one answer. So I think that's more powerful than me as the instructor doing a didactic lecture and say, well, you could do this or you could do this. I'm just one dude, but if you've got those tutors all validating. So I think that's a very powerful benefit of PBL, is to show that there's more than one right answer. Yes?
That's pretty much the case in engineering design. There is many answers actually. I want your comments about the merits of what seems like oral assessment in this case versus if it was written.
So, yeah, so can you repeat that just for me?
Meaning it seems that the tutor here would be doing oral assessment of the individuals of the group.
Okay.
What would be the relative merits of doing this versus getting everyone write something and the tutor assessing it later?
Perfect. So what would be the merits of the tutor? So it sounds like it's like more of a, the tutor is assessing the verbal participation of the students, which is correct.
Like an oral exam.
Like an oral exam, that's right. And what would be the merits of perhaps instead having the students write something that the tutor will assess the written portion of it. I think so. And it's a point well taken. I think though the neat thing about this course is because I've got already some exams that are short answers. So I'm actually testing, and that's one of the reasons why I technically don't want to completely get rid of exams, because one of my pet peeves is I don't think the students get enough practice in writing. And as a pharmacist, like I write clinical notes every single day, and I think that's essential. So I like that aspect of my course. So I can test their writing skills and their reasoning in a written note on the exam. But I would say in pharmacy anyway, I would say the vast majority of communicating care plans or educating patients or educating physicians or nurses, or so much of that is done in an oral fashion. And so that's what I like actually, having the tutors focus on like an oral exam. This is a great opportunity for an individual to say, you know what, Steve, okay, I liked your plan. You said you would address this by saying, try marijuana-laced brownies as opposed to smoking. The problem is your rationale, you didn't articulate that very well. So I can test him from saying that and give him some tips on how to maybe improve that, right? So focus on, you know, whatever quality assurance, whatever it is. So I like both. So, but again, there may be a course where you'd say, I kind of like this and I prefer, maybe in the engineering, maybe I would rather test the written ability for that. That's certainly an option. I've never actually heard of that in any of the PBL courses that I'm aware of, but I think that's a very unique way to do it. I don't think we would switch it just because I think it's an important aspect of what pharmacists do to test the oral communication as well as the written end. Any comments, or would you agree? Or?
Yeah, I agree.
Okay.
Yeah, I do barely any writing in my side,
So it's almost all verbal, eh? Yeah. Good. Yes, question.
Just a quick question. Do you keep the same tutor with the groups?
Yeah,
Okay.
we do, and it's again, especially when you get really good tutors. Honestly, the best part of the feedback that the students give of the course is often, my favorite thing is the tutor.
You have the same tutor the whole
You bet. And you can't get more street cred than the tutors I've got because they're out there practicing every day. So when me, the airy-fairy academic, writes a case like this, Justine can be there going, I just saw a patient like this yesterday. Right? And this happens, right? And then, oh, wow, okay. And then the students can also quiz her, hey, what's it like being out there? You just graduated a couple years ago, what did you find tough? There's such a great mentorship, like interaction there. So for that reason, we do allow them to stay the same because it develops a richness and makes that learning environment more comfortable. Because by tutorial 3 or 4, they go, wow, she's not just smart, she's a really good person. I feel comfortable sharing myself in there. So yeah, we do keep the tutors together.
I also wanted to say, like, we do a midterm evaluation and then a final, and I really like tracking their progress, right? So I'll give them a written assessment halfway through, and then I see, okay, they've accepted my feedback, they're improving, so they get a chance to get a higher mark in the end.
That's a great point, and that's another reason why we keep them together. I forgot all about that. That's great. So essentially, just really fast, just to share again some of the core elements of PBL. So some courses that might call themselves PBL but aren't quite. Again, some of the issue here is if there's information provided to students like either a lecture or, hey, here's a reading and then we're going to do this case, to me that's a modification of the PBL learning style that just doesn't fit, because that's the point. I'd rather have you start with the case and you go figure out stuff as opposed to me filling your mind. Learning objectives are often provided, especially in the case-based model, and I think that really takes away from that organic thing that should happen and get you to be excited at developing your own learning plan. Again, if there's insufficient time allowed for students to go off and learn independently, I think that degrades the quality of experience, because once again, it's not just finding the information, but it's assessing the quality of that information that's found. Instead of the case-based, where, as I mentioned, at Harvard is like you've got this prof up here and it's Socratic reasoning, like, hey, what did you think of this? That's still instructor focused. It's the students who are leading all of the discussions, right, under a tutor's guidance, but generally speaking, it's the students who are leading all of this. And the last thing is it's that reflection piece. I think that's crucial to consider. I think that's one of the big advantages of this method of style. And so I think we spoke a lot about the question. I know I'm way over it. Like, we're supposed to take a break and stuff. So over to you. Like, I'll shut up now. Sorry.
So what we'll do is we'll take a break, and then, thank you. We'll take a break, then we're going to come back and...
That's just my, you don't,
oh, I don't need this,
so you don't need that. Exactly.
Thank you.
But you can hold that.
We're going to take a break. Then we're going to come back. Justine is going to tell us what it was like to be a student in PBL, so please take advantage of being able to ask a student what it's like to participate in that and learn from that. We are also going to hear what it was like to be a tutor, what kind of resources she appreciated that Jeff provided, how long it took her to get comfortable, things like that. So again, ask her questions about what a tutor would like or need to get up to speed on PBL. And then after that, we're going to just open it up to questions. So we've got Steve and Scott, who have just finished implementing PBL, so they remember what they thought it was like and what it's really like. We've got Jeff, who has been doing this for a long time and knows what, learned from his mistakes, what he finds has really worked. Justine, why she does it, how it's helped her as a professional in her field. And Oscar, who's done case-based, and why he is thinking of moving to problem-based. So what is the gap that he feels it's filling? Why is his course maybe benefiting from it? Are there some courses that are better for PBL than others? Okay, so those are the things we'll be looking at when we come back. As Jeff noted, we'll be giving you the slides, and while you're gone, I'm just going to pass out the tutor guide just so you can see the kind of notes that the tutors had while they were facilitating yours. Okay, we'll be back in about 10 minutes.